We've talked about cocaine, we've talked about all the amphetamines. Now we're going to talk about all the other stimulants. Humans seem to really like stimulants. No matter where you are, they've always sought them out to use them to give themselves a little bit of energy. So what we're going to find is that all around the world, people have been using different types of stimulants, including caffeine. Of course, caffeine is the stimulant of choice in the United States. If you use Drink Monster or Rockstar or Red Bull, of course, you're using caffeine. If you drink coffee for your stimulant, then you're using caffeine, of course. If you drink soda to wake up in the morning, then soda pop, then you're probably using caffeine unless you're drinking Sprite or something. If you're drinking anything brown or yellow or whatever.
What's the number on that one?
Good question. It's 119. So stimulants are being used all over the world. I told you the story about being stationed at a rapid deployment force base in Egypt. We were out in the middle of the desert, and they would, the Egyptian truck drivers would resupply us, and they would come driving over the desert. Of course, you don't need. It's just like here. You don't really need roads. You can just drive over the desert. Out there, they don't have. And anything growing, nothing's growing out there, nothing's green, it's all just sand. And it's mostly hard packed. You do run into, you run into you run into soft sand every once in a while, but not very often. Anyway, these guys are driving across the desert, and they're headed directly for us, and they're chewing this stuff called khat, K-H-A-T, or how much have they chewed? Are they a little bit inebriated? What's going to happen next? Sometimes they miss our camp, even though they could see it. Sometimes they would. Sometimes they run through the camp. Of course, if they were coming in, usually the trucks were going at a relatively high rate of speed. They couldn't drive real fast because, of course, the desert slowed them down. But they'd be going 30 or 40, 45 miles an hour or whatever. And sometimes they ran right through our tents, which was... So if we saw them coming, everybody was warned. Sometimes they actually stopped, which was kind of exciting. If they missed us, they usually circled around and came back. But anyway, sometimes they ran right through the camp. Khat in the Middle East, betel nut in the Far East. In Asia, when I was in Vietnam, a lot of people were chewing betel nut. Yohimbe in Africa, and ephedra in the Mediterranean region. These are all the stimulants that we see around the world. Khat is a mild stimulant found in the Middle East. Smuggling of this drug in the United States has become more prevalent as more and more immigrants from the area come into the United States. The key stimulant in the leaf is cathinone, and this is important, because we're going to see that cathinone is being used around the world. Rather than methamphetamines, they use cathinone. Cathinone, it evaporates if the leaf isn't used in 48 hours. So it's only grown in one place. It's grown in the Horn of Africa. And if they harvest it, you've got 48 hours to get it out, or to use it before it evaporates. All the cathinone evaporates. This substance is said to produce an effect between caffeine and methamphetamine, so it gives you more energy than caffeine does, not quite as much as methamphetamines. Meth Cathinone is a synthetic version of cathinone. And we're going to be talking about Meth Cathinone in just a second. This drug is used extensively in the Horn of Africa and on the Arabian Peninsula. In Yemen, half the population uses khat, and a family may spend 1/3 of their income on the drug. So this drug is so important that they're willing to spend 1/3 of their income on that drug. This drug is a driving force of the economies of many of the countries in the area. The drug is used socially. So if you go to somebody's house, they may offer you khat, or they may offer you coffee. And when they brew coffee in the Middle East, it's extremely strong. It's very, very strong. And as a male, you have to show your masculinity by being able to drink this concentrated cowboy coffee, as it were, but it's, it's Arab coffee, and it's really, really strong stuff.
I don't think I could handle that.
Chronic cough, it's really,
Stronger than Folgers?
oh yeah. You think they use syrup in this stuff? What's going on here? I mean, it's thick. Chronic cot is used can cause physical exhaustion and suicidal depression when it's withdrawn, and of course that's part of the problem. That's one of the reasons why we never knew if the Egyptian truck drivers were going to run through our camp. Sometimes they had to shoot them. They had to shoot them because they thought that they were suicide bombers or something, so they just shot them. Not when I was there. They told stories of shooting these guys. Synthetic cathinone is known as meth cathinone. While this is only found sparingly in the United States, it is much more common in Europe and in fact represents 20% of the illicit drug use in the Russian Republic. So we see this a lot in Russia. The Russians have a lot of problems with drugs these days. Their government isn't very strong, so there's a lot of warlords and whatnot. Mafia, the Russian mafia is very strong. And actually they may be running the government. Meth cathinone, the synthetic, excuse me, the synthetic is much more intense than khat and as addictive as methamphetamines. With this drug, there is more dopamine reduction, and so Parkinsonianism is more common. So with meth, we saw what happened with the individual with the crack dancing. This is worse. This is a lot worse. So the Parkinsonian symptoms, the tremors and whatnot, become more permanent. So just because you wanted to get high when you were 20 years old, you may be condemning yourself to a life of Parkinsonism. In other words, you can't control your actions. So for the rest of your life, you're going to be shaking and moving and dancing around, unfortunately. Parkinsonian symptoms. Beetle nuts. Oh, beetle nuts are so cool. Beetle nuts come from the betel nut palm and are found all over southern Asia. It is used extensively in India, Pakistan, the Arab world, especially in Taiwan. It's very strong in Malaysia, the Philippines, New Guinea, Polynesia, southern China, Africa. We saw it in Vietnam, of course. We saw it not so much in Korea, but in the tropical regions of Asia. Worldwide, 200 to 450 million people use this substance. That's what it looks like. So what's the big deal?
They look like grapes.
It does. Well, they're nuts. So yeah, you just peel the stuff off and you get to the soft stuff inside. The soft stuff inside is red, which is kind of interesting. In Taiwan, 70% of men and 1% of women use the substance. One recent controversy in Taiwan is the Beetle Nut Beauties, who man betel nut kiosks while dressed provocatively to attract male customers. This is about the most conservative outfit that I could find. The rest of the outfits are fairly provocative, far more provocative than this outfit is. She's at least got part of her parts covered. These are known as Beetle Nut Beauties. They're very attractive. They tend to be very attractive women, relatively skinny women. They can control their weight by chewing betel nuts, as odd as it may seem. Some authorities are demanding more modesty for fear of compromising public morals. These ladies are standing on the side of the road, and you can imagine the families are driving by, and here's this lady that's practically naked trying to sell the betel nuts to the men. And that may be one of the reasons why 70% of the men in Taiwan are addicted to betel nuts. The active ingredient in betel nuts is ericoline, which induces an increase of epinephrine and norepinephrine in the central nervous system. This causes a mild euphoria, excitation, and a decrease of fatigue. The juice of the nut is dark red and stains the mouth red to black, which is always attractive. I can remember the first time I saw anybody who chewed betel nut, their teeth were black, which is always an attractive color for your teeth. and her lips were red. I mean, they were dark red. It wasn't like red lipstick or something. They were dark red. So her teeth were black and her lips were red. And this is one of the things that you see. Actually, if this were a better picture, if this thing weren't. Anyway, if this were a better picture, you would see that her teeth are black. Ericoline and muscarine are fairly toxic and cause mouth and esophagus irritation that might lead to cancer in the area. 7% of chronic users develop a cancer, which isn't that much if you think about it. In India, they mix beetle nuts with sweetened tobacco, and it makes a product known as gutka. Gutka.
Interesting names they come up with.
It probably means something obscene. Normally they do. So that's beetle nut. So I've run into beetle nut and I've run into cot, but I've never, we've all run into yohimbine. Yohimbine is an extract of the yohimbe tree found in Africa. The tree is a member of the coffee family, and the extract is bitter and spicy and often brewed in a similar manner as coffee, but it doesn't taste very good. Well, it's really spicy. The active ingredient in yohimbine is an alpha-2 adrenergic antagonist that increases the neurotransmitter norepinephrine. Yohimbine has been used for centuries as a mild aphrodisiac and a sexual rejuvenator, and that's what it's known as in Africa. Yohimbine's sexual side effects seem to stem from its ability to increase penile blood flow. It has been used to treat erectile dysfunction and is reputed to induce sexual arousal in women, something that, of course, we haven't been able to do in the United States, or no pharmaceutical company has been able to do that. The drug does increase blood pressure and it does increase your heart rate. Male enhancement products include male performance, yohimbe power, manpower, and Aphrodine. Aphrodine I remember seeing advertised on television. Aphrodine. It is also found in Sobe Energy. So if you've ever seen this stuff, Sobe Energy is in a green. The Sobe bottle. You know what the Sobe bottle looks like, and it's green. It's got a green label on it. Sobe Energy. So it's got yohimbine in it. I was teaching this class, and I was teaching this slide when I was in Iowa, and one of the ladies said, my husband bought that, and he wanted me to drink it. I wonder if he knew, that it had yohimbine in it, and that it, theoretically would make her sexually aroused or whatever. Anyway, she got pissed. And she went home. She went home and dumped it down the sink. She said her husband was really upset. Sobe. Next time you see Sobe Energy, who knows? Yohimbine serves as a local anesthetic. In larger doses, it may produce a mild euphoria, and sometimes it can produce hallucinations, depending on how sensitive you are to it. At toxic levels, it can produce paralysis of the respiratory system and death, but that takes a lot. Ephedra is a bush that grows in the deserts all over the world. The drug that it grows here. I see it. I've got a plant right outside my house, and I was trying to put up the fence this weekend, and that damn bush got in the way. Anyway, it's an ephedra plant. The drug that it produces, of course, is ephedrine. The drug is a mild, moderate to moderate stimulant that is used medicinally to treat asthma, to treat narcolepsy, allergies, and low blood pressure, if you've got low blood pressure. Ephedrine is also known as Marwith and Ma Huang, and has been used medicinally by the Chinese for 5,000 years. Back in the 80s and 90s, we were looking for answers to all of these strange everybody wanted to live forever. So they were coming up with all this different stuff. One of the things that they came up with was Ma Huang. So you could drink an elixir with Ma Huang in it, and theoretically it was supposed to lengthen your life. They also talked about mohimbe berries. There were a lot of different things that they were trying to market, hoping that people would grasp them and start using them so that they could sell more of their drinks. But Ma Huang was one of them. You can still find Ma Huang, of course, if you go to a store that sells that kind of stuff. Anyway, you can't find it at Walmart, but you may be able to find it at GNC or something. Next time I go to GNC, I'll ask them if they've got any Ma Huang. Ephedrine was first synthesized in 1885 and for decades was the only effective treatment for asthma. Ephedrine's effects are less severe than amphetamines, though a toxic level is more likely to lead to psychosis. But of course, getting a toxic level of ephedrine takes a lot, and it's really bitter. Ephedrine and pseudoephedrine are the active ingredients in many cold products. Now, the interesting thing is that they put all this stuff in the cold products. Why? Well, they're trying to give you energy. One of the problems you have when you have a cold, of course, is you feel drained. So they put ephedrine and pseudoephedrine in the cold products. It doesn't do anything to your cold. I mean, it really doesn't to cure your cold. It only works on about 13% of the population. So normally they put this stuff in there just so that it gives you a little bit of a buzz. They also make up the molecule that is converted to make methamphetamine and meth cathinone. This substance has also been implicated in sports doping scandals and so is banned by the NFL and illegal in Ohio. So you can't use any cold remedies in Ohio or if you're a football player in the NFL. The sale of cold remedies is now controlled to prevent the hoarding of enough of the substance to convert it into more destructive drugs, especially methamphetamines. Johnny, let me write you down so I know that you're here. There we go. Gotcha. Good enough. Ephedrine is also known. Oh, I've already done that one, haven't I? Okay. Wait a minute. I went the wrong direction, didn't I? Caffeine. Let's talk about caffeine. Got any caffeine? You drink it?
Just now.
Coffee?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to tell you about the stuff that you just drank. Caffeine is the most popular stimulant in the world. It's the most popular mood-altering drug in the world. It's the most habit-forming drug in the world. Most popular habit-forming drug in the world. If you're sensitive to it, it can wake you up. It can give you energy. If you're not sensitive to it, you wonder what the hell people are drinking it for. I told you about my brother that drank a Mountain Dew and he was headed for Virginia and ended up in Maine.
I just don't get how that's possible.
He's that sensitive to caffeine. But then again, my dad could drink it by the bucket load. And not Mountain Dew, he wouldn't drink Mountain Dew. But he'd drink coffee. And it didn't affect him at all. My mother, she could drink a half a cup of coffee and all of a sudden she's got heart palpitations. She's very sensitive. 85% of the people in the United States consume substantial amounts of caffeine every day. And that includes, I drink Mountain Dew. I drink a lot of caffeine. It doesn't do anything to me, but I drink it. I drink it for the sugar. I like the I drink the red stuff. Code Red.
Mm-hmm.
I love that stuff. I like the cherry flavor. And I'm not that crazy about regular Mountain Dew. The yellow stuff. Caffeine is naturally found in coffee. It's found in tea. It's also found in chocolate. Caffeine is put in many products to give us energy. Of course, if you drink cola, you drink Coca-Cola, you drink Pepsi-Cola, you drink RC Cola, I don't know, whatever you want to drink. Mountain Dew, it's all that superficial. They put that in there. It's not in there naturally. Energy drinks, of course, have caffeine in them. Over-the-counter energy supplements, that 5-hour energy. I know. I've never tried one. What difference would it make? I mean, it doesn't affect me at all. But I don't know. Is it going to keep me awake? No, it doesn't keep me awake. It doesn't do anything to me.
I don't think I'm ever going to drink another Pepsi product.
Oh, really?
After hearing
What happened?
some crazy fool injecting his Let me just make that note. Now, some idiot working for the Pepsi company
Right.
has HIV and he is injecting his blood into the Pepsi products.
That sounds like something Coca-Cola would say, so that you would stop buying Pepsi products.
Well, I don't drink much of either one.
There you
Only
go.
when I.
The most popular, widely consumed beverage in the world is water. And number 2 is tea. Tea is the second most widely consumed beverage. Tea has been consumed in China for 4,700 years. Tea has been ritualized in many cultures, like the Japanese culture and the Chinese culture. The English discovered tea from the Portuguese traders, and the country became obsessed with tea. And if you go to England, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody takes a break. It's tea time, and they not only drink tea, but they also eat a biscuit. And in their case, biscuits are cookies.
No wonder my friend used to always call it when I was in Vegas. You want to come over for some tea?
There you go.
Cool.
And they do really weird things to their tea. They don't just put sugar in it or honey. They put milk in it. Yeah, okay. I can't drink tea.
And he used to sit there and he's like, "Do you want some milk?" I was like,
No. Who puts milk in their tea? Well, all the English do. Coffee was cultivated in Ethiopia in 650 AD, and from there slowly spread into Europe, though along the way many cultures banned it as an intoxicant because of the caffeine. In the United States, each coffee drinker consumes an average of 20 pounds of coffee a year. So if you drink coffee, you average 20 pounds of coffee a year. 8 ounces of brewed coffee will deliver about 135 milligrams of caffeine. An 8 ounces of instant coffee will deliver 95 milligrams of caffeine. 8 ounces of decaf coffee still delivers about 7 milligrams of caffeine. So all this caffeine in all this soda pop and in your Monster drink, all that caffeine comes from decaf coffee. They pull the caffeine out. What does caffeine taste like? It's nasty. It is bitter. That's one of the reasons why they have to put so much sugar. That's why one of the reasons they have to put so much sweetener in soda pop. Why? Because the caffeine is so bitter. They have to neutralize the caffeine.
Bruce,
Yeah.
Bruce, a question so is it having too much coffee and caffeine can do to your kidneys?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, it can. It can also get to your prostate gland. So, okay. If you drink too much caffeine, your prostate will swell. If your prostate swells, so you can't urinate. You can't empty your bladder, and that causes you to have to go to the bathroom a lot. It also slows your kidneys down because your kidneys are functioning at maximum capacity when your bladder is empty. So if your bladder isn't empty, then your kidneys are probably not functioning at full capacity. And if you do this to yourself too much, then your kidneys, you start having problems with your kidneys. You really don't want that to happen. Okay. So just be careful. I mean, you can drink caffeine, but you need to be sure that you don't drink too much. Because you'll mess yourself up. And you certainly don't want your prostate to swell. You guys are way too young to have swollen prostates. But if that happens, of course, it blocks the ureter, and you can't empty your bladder anymore. That's one of the reasons why they talk about on television. They talk about these guys that have to go to the bathroom every time they find a restroom, because when they urinate, they're not emptying the bladder completely. They can't because of the swollen prostate. And so there are drugs that you can take that will relieve the inflammation in your prostate gland. And that's what they're talking about. They're trying to sell you a pill that allows you to urinate. And so they talk about that for men, but what do they talk about for women? Well, women can't control their urination, so they have to wear diapers. I know. It's horrible when you watch an old person's channel because they're talking about the men who can't urinate and the women who can't control their urination.
Kind of sounds like the nursing home out in France.
Well, it could be. It could be the nursing home.
We used to, I did my clinicals out there in France.
Yeah, it's
A
pretty
good
nasty.
semester.
I know. I've been in nursing homes before. It's kind of depressing.
Sad how they try to escape too.
Well, they don't. They are suffering from dementia, so they can't help themselves. Actually, I think it's kind of cool that they're trying to escape. But at least because it at least gives them something to live for, is escape. Archaeological evidence indicates that indigenous people in Central America brewed cocoa products as early as 2,600 years ago. They didn't sweeten it, it was bitter, but they were drinking cocoa. From the Mayans, this practice spread to the rest of South and Central American power brokers, the Aztecs and the Incans. If you've been watching the news, they have been doing ground radar in Central America. It's the jungles there are extremely thick. And what they've found is all these Mayan villages, all these Mayan structures. So the Mayan Empire was a lot more extensive than anybody had thought before. The Mayan Empire kind of collapsed for one reason or another. But of course, now we know that their culture was far more extensive than we've ever thought before. Cocoa was originally marketed in Europe as an aphrodisiac, but soon became merely candy. Cocoa has a small amount of caffeine, but other active ingredients in the substance act as stimulants as well. Theobromine is one of them. Theobromine, of course, is actually makes us feel like we're in love. That's cocoa. And so the reason that you give chocolate to people on Valentine's Day is so potentially you'll get lucky. Because
Brother.
it makes you, it makes people feel like they're in love. So if it's a romantic partner, then of course you're going to give them chocolate. If you give it to somebody that you're not in love with, then it's not going to make any difference, right? It's got to be somebody that you're romantic with. In the late 19th and early 20th century, manufacturers of cola soft drinks replaced cocaine with caffeine as an energy booster. Some of the caffeine comes from the cola nut, from the African cola tree, but most of it today comes from caffeine removed from decaffeinated coffee, and that is the caffeine. Energy drinks began with the invention of Red Bull in 1987. So before 1987, if you wanted a blast of caffeine, you drank either coffee or you drank a Coke. Red Bull delivers 80 milligrams of caffeine in an 8.3 ounce can. 8 ounces of brewed coffee delivers 135 milligrams of caffeine, so we can see the difference is 55 milligrams. 12 ounces of Mountain Dew delivers 54 milligrams of caffeine, so if you drink an 8 ounce can of Red Bull, you get a lot more caffeine than if you drink a 12 ounce can of Mountain Dew. All the Mountain Dew products, by the way, have exactly the same amount of caffeine. So it's not like you can drink Code Red and get less of a blast, or drink, I don't know, they've got all kinds of flavors now. Live Wire, I guess, is the orange stuff.
And then the Baja Blast.
The Baja Blast, which tastes like coconut. Red Bull also contains taurine, ginseng, guarana, glucose, B-complex vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates. So it's got a lot of stuff in it. Soviet Adrenaline Rush also delivers 80 milligrams of caffeine in an 8.3 ounce can. Starbucks 2 times shot delivers a whopping 105 milligrams of caffeine in just 6.5 ounce can. So we're getting 8 ounces of coffee. Brewed coffee is about 135 milligrams. This is 105 milligrams, but it's only 6.5 ounces. So it's pretty strong stuff. Almost as strong as a cup of coffee. A new phenomenon that has hit the bar scene is to drink vodka mixed with Red Bull. It's known as birch. So if you ask for a birch at a bar, especially in California, they'll give you Red Bull and vodka. That's what they'll give you. It is reputed that this mixture will slow the process of getting drunk and result in less of a hangover the next morning. But that's not true.
I've actually seen people mix Red Bull with orange juice.
Okay,
I don't know.
that's nothing. It's diluted Red Bull, okay? Okay, but that's not really true. What actually happens is that you've got a depressant and you've got a stimulant, and they're working against one another. So when you are, as you are drinking the Red Bull, wait a minute, as you're drinking the alcohol, of course, it's a depressant. So you're getting a stimulant at the same time. So you feel like you can drink more drinks. And so these people are consuming larger amounts of alcohol, feeling like they're not getting drunk. But the reality is, if you've got alcohol in your system, whether you've got that caffeine in your system as well, you're making yourself, you're getting to a toxic level relatively quickly. So these individuals are consuming a lot more alcohol, and of course that's what's causing the problems. Deaths due to overconsumption of Red Bull have led to banning of the drink in several countries. You can't buy Red Bull in France, you can't buy Red Bull in Denmark, and you can't buy Red Bull in Canada. Because people are mixing them with alcohol. And when they mix it with alcohol, they consume too much alcohol, and they kill themselves. Red Bull is a product that was developed in Austria. And here we've got France that won't allow you to sell Red Bull, which is kind of interesting, which I find fascinating. Guarana is a national drink of Brazil. Guarana comes from the guarana shrub, which produces beans that have about 2 times the caffeine as coffee beans. The Brazilian drink normally delivers about 30 milligrams of caffeine in a 12-ounce can. And this is what it looks like, guarana. They tried to bring it into the United States. I used to drink guarana from time to time. It didn't really give me, well, caffeine doesn't really work on me. And so the guarana really didn't do anything. It had a berry flavor. It was like drinking, I don't know, raspberry soda or something. But it tasted syrupy. It wasn't very good. Anyway, it didn't catch on in the United States. Mate is a plant whose leaves are brewed like tea. Mate is the national drink of Argentina and delivers between 35 to 130 milligrams of caffeine per 8-ounce serving. 3% of the world's caffeine comes from mate. If you follow the Pope is Argentinian, and whenever somebody from Argentina visits him, they always bring him mate to drink, which is kind of interesting. They give him some mate. Now the reality is that mate, of course, doesn't deliver any more caffeine than a brewed cup of coffee. Remember, a brewed cup of coffee delivers about 135 milligrams of caffeine, and mate delivers between 35 and 130 for the same size serving. Caffeine is a very bitter chemical. It's an alkaloid in a class of chemicals called xanthines. It is found in more than 60 plants around the world. The half-life of caffeine is 3 to 7 hours. It takes 15 to 35 hours for caffeine to clear your system. So if you drink, Johnny just had a coffee, so that coffee is not going to leave your system for half a day or a whole day, or maybe a day and a half, depending on what else you do, how much exercise you do. Swedes average 425 milligrams of caffeine per day. The English average 445 milligrams of caffeine per day. With their tea, Swedes, of course, are drinking coffee. How about Americans? Americans average only 211 milligrams of caffeine a day. In other words, the Brits consume twice as much caffeine as Americans do. 17% of the caffeine that Americans drink is in tea. 16% comes from soft drinks. 60% is in the coffee that they drink. About half of all Americans drink 3.3 cups of coffee a day. Is that about right? 3.3 cups of coffee? Yeah, okay. Edison, you drink coffee? 3.3 cups, what do you think? 1 cup? Is that about right, 3.3 cups? 3 or 4 cups? Yeah.
For some people, not all.
Okay. 20% of U.S. adults consume more than 350 milligrams of caffeine per day.
My late father-in-law used to drink.
Sit and drink coffee. He could drink a whole pot of coffee. Just sitting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem to buzz him out either, did it? Just as didn't have the shakes. 3% of U.S. adults. What do we know? 3% of U.S. adults drink more than 650 milligrams of caffeine per day. 65% of the 450 different soft drinks produced in the United States contain caffeine. Anything clear, you probably are all right. It doesn't have any caffeine in it. Colas, almost all the colas have caffeine. Caffeine is used in several prescriptions and over-the-counter medications. It's used in bronchodilators, in decongestants, in diuretics, in analgesics, in alertness aids, in appetite suppressants, in menstrual pain controllers. What is that stuff that women take for menstrual cramps?
Midol?
Midol, that thing, Midol. Yeah. The difference between Midol and aspirin, or acetaminophen, is caffeine.
Midol carries the caffeine and...
Midol has caffeine in it, and if you take caffeine with if you've got menstrual cramps, bloating is one part of the problem, and caffeine acts as a diuretic. It also acts as an analgesic, taking pain away, but it reduces the swelling, reduces the bloating. That's why Midol works.
So what happens if you mix that together on accident?
What are we mixing?
What do you call it? The Midol and the acetaminophen?
Acetaminophen's another painkiller. It's just another painkiller. Yeah, you're all right. That's what Midol is.
I didn't see me. No, it's just weird because I had a relative, well actually an in-law who took both of them at the same time.
Should be okay.
She kind of got a little...
Loopy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe she was sensitive to the caffeine?
Yeah, probably.
I didn't know there was caffeine in Midol.
Yeah. Yeah, check it out next time. It's the second highest medication in there. Acetaminophen's number 1, or aspirin, depending on what kind of Midol you take. But caffeine's number 2.
I go with the normal acetaminophen.
Yeah, probably has acetaminophen. As a vasoconstrictor, it can work on migraine headaches. It's actually a vasodilator, it's not a vasoconstrictor. Caffeine works by inhibiting the effect of adenosine. Adenosine is a neuromodulator that depresses your mood. It induces sleep. It has anticonvulsant properties. It causes low blood pressure. It slows the heart rate. It dilates the blood vessels. So if you take, it's a vasoconstrictor. So if you take caffeine, it blocks adenosine. And of course, caffeine's effect is controlled by heredity. So either you're sensitive to it or you're not sensitive to it. My brother's overly sensitive to it, and I'm not sensitive to it at all. My son can drink all the coffee in the world and it doesn't bother him. So it's going to be interesting to see if my grandson is sensitive to caffeine. To those sensitive to caffeine, 350 milligrams per day may cause anxiety, insomnia, gastric irritation, high blood pressure, nervousness, and a flushed face. One study where subjects were given 500 milligrams of caffeine showed that a 32% elevation of the stress hormones for an extended period of time with those 500 milligrams of caffeine. Caffeine is lethal at 10 grams, 100 cups of coffee, or 185 cans of Mountain Dew. I don't know if you could consume 185 cans of Mountain Dew or drink 100 cups of coffee, but if you did, you'd probably kill yourself. It is susceptible, in susceptible people, too much caffeine can trigger nervousness. Caffeine is one of the substances that people prone to panic attacks should avoid. And this is a good idea if you've had panic attacks, or if you know anybody that has panic attacks, tell them to try to back off the caffeine and see if that doesn't take care of their panic attacks. Counselors should ask their clients about their caffeine consumption, as sensitivity in excess amounts might create artificial anxiety. Excess caffeine consumption can lower the fertility in women. 350 milligrams per day will not only make it less likely that a woman will get pregnant, but will double the chance of a miscarriage if she does get pregnant. Excessive caffeine consumption has also been implicated in a woman's developing benign lumps in her breasts. My second wife had benign lumps in her breasts, and she drank, what did she drink? Dr. Pepper. She was a Dr. Pepper drinker. Researchers also feel that caffeine may make it difficult to lose weight because caffeine triggers the release of insulin, which metabolizes sugar and in turn creates a deficit in the blood, which causes hunger. So caffeine can make you hungry. I know. Since there are a number of different hereditary structures that dictate sensitivity and tolerance to caffeine, talking about amounts and effects varies from one individual to another. High caffeine consumers may actually get sleepy when only consuming small amounts of the substance because it activates the adenosine receptor sites.
All this talking about caffeine, I'm getting craving for coffee.
Is that right? You're getting? Do you usually drink coffee?
Just not.
Not very often.
Not.
Withdrawal symptoms from caffeine begins after 12 to 24 hours of abstinence and peaks after 24 to 48 hours. So if you ever decide to go off caffeine, probably you're only going to feel the effect for 2 days. After that, it's all gone. The symptoms can last for 2 days to a week. Throbbing headache, sleepiness, fatigue, lethargy, depression, decreased alertness, sleep problems, irritability, and flu-like symptoms. So you get a runny nose, nausea, vomiting, muscle pains or stiffness. Okay. That's all we're going to talk about caffeine. So caffeine is a drug as well. It's a stimulant, just like ephedrine or cot or beetle nuts. Nicotine comes from the leaves of the tobacco plant. You guys are the ones that gave us tobacco. Thank you very much. That wasn't very nice of you. Look at all those white people that have died from consuming tobacco. That's kind of mean.
They won't overboard that.
They do, you're right. The tobacco plant is a member of the nightshade family, which also includes tomatoes, belladonna, henbane, and petunias. So you can smoke petunias, you can smoke tomato leaves. Don't smoke belladonna, don't smoke henbane. It'll cause a negative reaction. In the United States, 90% of the tobacco is delivered to its users as cigarettes. Once upon a time, cigarettes weren't really invented until the end of the 19th century. So people didn't really start smoking them en masse until World War I. And the reason they smoked tobacco, or the reason they smoked cigarettes instead of cigars or pipes, is because in the trenches and during World War I, you could smoke a cigarette in a couple minutes, but if you smoked a cigar, you smoked a cigar for 30 or 40 minutes. If you smoked a pipe, you could smoke it for, 30 or 40 minutes. And of course, the probability of a sniper seeing the glow of your cigarette or of your pipe or your cigar was much higher than a cigarette. In India, 85% of all men use tobacco in the form of chewing tobacco. So strangely enough, throughout the Western world, it's smoking cigarettes or smoking cigars or pipes. But in India, they don't smoke. They chew. They're chewers. So they get their nicotine in the form of chewing tobacco. Tobacco came to the old world, from the Americas, and it originally was smoked in pipes, of course. In the 18th century, people began chewing the leaves and snorting the powder in their noses as snuff. Now, the reason they did this is so that they could sneeze. It made them sneeze. And they thought that a sneeze was like an orgasm. So they would make themselves sneeze because it felt like it, or they thought it did. Anyway, silly people. Smokeless tobacco continued to be the most popular use of tobacco until World War I. A lot of people chewed tobacco, and they spit a lot. But they were outside, so who cared? Ugh, still a mess. Around World War I, packaged cigarettes became popular in the trenches of Europe. It was possible because cigarette rolling machines improved. Cigarettes used a milder form of tobacco which allowed deeper inhalation of the tobacco. So they actually got a bigger jolt out of the tobacco that they were, the cigarettes that they were smoking. Mass production produced lower prices. Advertising popularized the product. More aggressive marketing brought the product around the world. Heavy smokers in the United States will smoke 20 to 40 cigarettes per day. U.S. tobacco users spend $89 billion a year on tobacco products. 24.9% of the population over 12, 60.5 million Americans, smoked cigarettes in the past month. 51 million Americans smoke cigarettes every day. 13.6 million Americans smoke cigars every day. 2.2 million Americans smoke tobacco in pipes every day. 7.7 million Americans use smokeless tobacco every day. One of the cool things about this reservation is that you guys don't dip snuff. Not like they do up north. My God, everybody's got, if they in their jeans, they've got this round spot from their Copenhagen in their pocket. Everybody does, and it's nasty. I'll be lecturing along up in at Fort Belknap. And these guys are spitting into these clear bottles. I don't know why. Why can't you spit into a bottle I can't see, okay? And it's nasty. It is so nasty.
Oh, Bruce has got one.
It just makes you want to throw up. And of course, then they leave the bottles sitting on the tables. Oh, God, what a mess. It is nasty. It's water bottles. They spit into water bottles. Smokeless tobacco comes in three forms. Moist snuff that is put in the mouth next to the gums. Now, one of the things about this snuff that they put between their cheek and gums, they put in fiberglass. They put fiberglass to cut to cut your gums. I know, fiberglass in the snuff, so that it gets into your system faster. Makes it more addictive. They also use powdered or dry snuff, which is drawn up the nose. It's not that popular in the United States. They also use loose leaf chew, which is put in the mouth and chewed. The active ingredient in tobacco is nicotine. I had a neighbor that was chewed tobacco. He thought it was cool. He was a lawyer, and he had a spittoon in his office. Well, eventually, of course, and he's not real bright, so he chewed tobacco for an extended length of time. He got cancer. He got cancer of the mouth and the esophagus, and they had to cut out the muscles in his neck because there were cancerous nodules on all these things on his salivary glands. And he always chewed on one side. So one side of his face is fine. The other side of his face is a mess. They've taken out the muscles in his neck, so he has his chin down on his chest, and all these muscles, they've fused the vertebra in his neck because he doesn't have muscles to support it. So here he is. He walks around like this. He's a judge. He's a judge, and he's got this one side of his face is just a mess. The other side's fine, but he looks like he's had a stroke. And he's been this way for about 15 years. That's a tragedy. I know it's a tragedy. Anyway, he's a mess. The active ingredient in tobacco is nicotine. Nicotine is highly poisonous alkaloid that is bitter, smelly, and colorless. Tobacco leaves have about 2 to 5% nicotine in them. Smoking tobacco delivers nicotine to the brain in 5 to 8 seconds. Smokeless tobacco delivers nicotine to the brain in 3 to 8 minutes. Cigarettes contain 10 milligrams of nicotine, but a typical smoker will only get 1 to 3 milligrams in their system with one cigarette. 70 milligrams of nicotine is fatal. So potentially you could inject somebody with a fatal dosage of nicotine and kill them, and nobody would find out because they wouldn't think about it. Nicotine is naturally acting, or found in nature. Chewing tobacco will deliver 4.5 milligrams of nicotine to the brain, while snuff will deliver 3.5 milligrams. Remember, 70 milligrams is fatal. The first cigarette of the day will raise the heart rate by 10 to 20 beats and the blood pressure by 5 to 10 units. Irma's. Nicotine affects the central nervous system and disrupts the following neurotransmitters. It disrupts your endorphins, your epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, and acetylcholine. I'll sign you in. Okay, thank you.
That was gonna be the only girl.
Nicotine mimics acetylcholine, filling nicotinic acetylcholine receptor sites, exaggerating the cholinergic effects, increasing your heart rate, your blood pressure, your memory. It increases your memory, it increases your learning. So if you smoke tobacco, you learn faster. Isn't this exciting? Let's all light up. We'll learn more. It improves your reflexes. It makes you more aggressive. It disrupts your sleep. Whoops. It disrupts your sexual activity. Wait a minute. It helps your mental acuity. So if you smoke tobacco, it actually helps you. I was watching a movie last night. I was watching The Greatest Game Ever Played, and this guy lit up his pipe. He was playing very badly. It's a golf game. It was a golf match. And he was playing very relatively poorly, lit his pipe, and all of a sudden he birdied the next 4 holes. It helps your reflexes. It helps your mental acuity. Well, he wasn't having sex, so it didn't bother that portion of it. But it really helped his golf game. Dopamine makes a smoker feel satisfied and calm. Thus, a cigarette both excites and tranquilizes at the same time. There you go. Let's all smoke.
I had a friend who was completely addicted to nicotine. He couldn't, we're having I forgot what word. Oh, they were in a place where he couldn't light up. And he's sitting there trying to figure out what to do, moving his hands around. And so finally my brother asked him, "Dude, are you okay?" And he's like, I need nicotine, I need a cigarette. So my brother digs into his back pocket. He goes, "This you can take anywhere. You don't have to light up nothing, and you can keep
Was it nicotine gum?
It was the chewing tobacco."
Oh, chewing tobacco. Okay.
He told him, "You can take this anytime as long as you got a bottle with you."
The bottle was spit into.
So he's looking at it, and the first time he ever tried.
People continue to take in tobacco toxins because it is a social ritual. It has become a social ritual. There's also a ritual aspect to the lighting up and smoking. They do it in a certain way. Smoking is perceived as an adult activity. Only adults do it. Little kids don't get to do it. Of course not. It manipulates your mood. It increases your dopamine level. It appears to be rebellious. It is sexually attractive. Don't we find that attractive? It controls your appetite, leading to weight loss. Nicotine is craved, of course, and that's one of the reasons why people do it. Nicotine suppresses the appetite and increases metabolism. The average smoker weighs 6 to 9 pounds lighter than the same size non-smoker. So if you want to lose weight, smoke cigarettes. It may be a fear of putting on weight that keeps some smokers from stopping. They're afraid they'll get pudgy. Smokers may also be self-medicating to combat depression. Remember, it raises all these, your norepinephrine level, raises your dopamine level, raises your acetylcholine level. Smokers are twice as likely as non-smokers to experience major depression. Smokers who have experienced at least one major depression episode of major depression are less likely to succeed in smoking cessation. And this is a problem. So maybe people smoke because they're depressed and it makes them feel better. So they're self-medicating. Just a thought. Nicotine creates an intense craving when a select level is not maintained in the bloodstream and the brain. The mere act of lighting up activates the nucleus accumbens, giving the smoker a sense of reward. The rush is similar to the feeling that a heroin user gets when they relapse after an abstinent period. This used to escape withdrawal symptoms is called negative drug reinforcement. And that's why they do it. Okay. Only a few hours of smoking leads to neural adaptation to the toxicity of the nicotine. Has anybody ever tried smoking? Have you tried a cigarette?
Not lately.
But you tried it once upon a time.
Yes.
Okay.
Then it was
Have you
not
tried it?
right.
Okay. Okay.
Not happy.
Edison? Tobacco? You've tried it? Okay.
Long time ago.
Like during my lonely time when I was looking for social.
When you were young and stupid?
Yeah.
So the first thing that happened to you probably made you feel sick. The first cigarette you smoked, you probably felt pretty shitty.
Nauseous.
Nauseous, exactly. Nobody wants to throw up. Ooh, let's smoke this and then we'll vomit. No, who does that? But the reality was, you smoked that first cigarette and it made you not feel very good, but then you smoked a second one, and all of a sudden you're not, the toxicity of the nicotine, which is a heavy toxin, all of a sudden you didn't have the same effect. The first morning hit after a long night's sleep is said to feel especially rush-like as the individual builds the nicotine level back to their daytime norms. I told you I was in a basic training unit, and about half of us smoked. They didn't let us smoke for like 3 weeks. We were in there for 6 weeks. We were in training for 6 weeks. So they finally let the smokers blaze up. So they've all got their cigarettes in their socks, and of course they're taking out their cigarettes and they're lighting up. 6 people passed out. 6 people passed out. I know. They haven't smoked in 3 weeks. And people will get a rush just from not having smoked since last night. They get a rush. These guys hadn't smoked for 6 weeks, and 6 people passed out. He was so pissed off that he didn't let us smoke again for the rest of the time we were there. We could only smoke during break times, but he didn't let us smoke in formation like he did that one day. I didn't smoke, of course, and I was one of the guys that had to carry one of the 6 guys to the sick bay. He was pissed. I'll tell you what, our TI was really upset. But then again, he had wouldn't let these guys smoke for 3 weeks. Some of them had. Some of them would sneak out and have a cigarette, but they weren't supposed to smoke. Anyway, 6 of them passed out. Unlike other drugs, nicotine does not continue to build up a tolerance, but the smoker finds a level of comfort that they attempt to maintain. And this is one of the reasons why, if you go out to a bunch of people that are smoking, some people are taking puffs off the cigarette every 10 or 15 seconds. Other individuals are just standing there for like a minute before they take a puff of cigarette. Why? Because they found a comfort level, and they're building it. They're titrating the nicotine in their system, and that's why they do what they do. It's fascinating. If you understand all of this stuff, all these people are titrating their nicotine level. The one that's smoking every 10 seconds, he needs a lot of nicotine in his system. The person that just stands there with the cigarette, they don't need that much nicotine in their system. So they're only taking a puff every minute or so.
The only time they do that when it goes like seconds, well, this is my theory, is because remember how I told you they had that little part by the gate in compound. So,
Yeah.
and practically anybody who's driving in or driving out will see them. So,
Yeah.
although being part of the crowd, the ones that just recently get out of class are up
Right.
there like,
Smoking really fast, because they need that titration, they need that excess nicotine in their
and
system.
then the other one who's just, kind of
Standing there with their cigarettes.
hanging out
Yeah, exactly.
is the ones who've been getting ready to go to class. And then that same person who was doing the 1 minute deal ends up coming out of class or whatever, and they're the ones who turn into the person who's,
They're trying to increase their titration level as fast as they possibly can.
and then the other person, it's like they switch roles right there. Yeah.
Right, yeah, because they have a deficit. They haven't been able to smoke since class started. So they need to build up the titration level, so they're smoking really fast. And the other individual, of course, they just had a cigarette, 20 minutes ago. So they don't need that much nicotine in their system. So they're smoking a lot slower.
Oh God, I remember my friend used, because like I said, he's addicted.
Right.
He used to drag me up, call me up early, God knows what time of the morning. And he used to tell me, come meet me outside in front of the boys' dorm and walk with me to the gate. I don't like to stand up there by myself.
So I can smoke.
And I was like, why are you going up there
It's
in the
6
first
o'clock in the
place?
morning.
Actually, it was 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And I'm late in bed, like, are you serious?
So your theory is absolutely correct. What we're doing is we're watching people increase their titration level. And if they've had a deficit, then they're going to smoke faster. If they don't have a deficit, then they're going to smoke a lot slower.
I
So-
even experienced that with myself. Since being that person who just
Right.
laid back, and then all of a sudden I had class throughout the days, didn't have no break.
Right.
Soon as class split out, God.
Smoking very heavily.
Does it increase it too, like if you smoke with alcohol?
Yes. Yeah, that
Yeah.
changes everything. I used to have a girlfriend, I know, as odd as that sounds. Once upon a time I had a girlfriend and she only smoked when she drank.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only time she could tolerate nicotine. The rest of the time she never didn't smoke. But if she drank, especially beer, not the hard stuff. Withdrawal from nicotine causes headaches, nervousness, fatigue, hunger, severe irritability, poor concentration, depression, increased appetite, sleep disturbances, intense nicotine cravings. The individual has experienced a true physiological dependence as the individual has created an excess number of nicotinic acetylcholine receptors that are screaming to be occupied. Without the nicotine to occupy these sites, the result is irritability and discomfort. The smoker needs the tobacco to feel normal. So now we're looking for normality here. Researchers now realize that the feelings of relaxation and well-being that smokers feel when they light up is actually the feeling of having the withdrawal symptoms subdued. So now they don't have the same withdrawal feelings. Nicotine addiction is a more powerful addiction than any other. While 23 million people have tried cocaine, only 600,000 people are weekly users and a rare few on a daily basis. 72 million people have tried marijuana, but only 6.8 million use on a weekly basis and only a fraction on a daily basis. 198 million people have tried alcohol, but only 48 million use it weekly and only 20 million on a daily basis. 162 million people have tried tobacco, 60 million smoke weekly, and 37 million smoke daily. So as you can see, nearly 1/4 of the people who try tobacco continue to use the drug daily as compared to the fractions from other drugs and 10% of the people using alcohol. As odd as that may seem. So tobacco is considered the most addictive substance known to man. 80% of smokers say they want to quit. 10% want to limit the amount they smoke. Only 10% of smokers want to continue, yet 100% do continue to smoke or chew. They can't stop. And it will kill you. It will cause all kinds of medical problems. My friend who just died of a heart attack, his medical bills, if he had medical bills, he's retired military, so the military takes care of all that. his medical bills are in the $300,000 range. He was in the hospital for 2 days before they pulled the plug on him. For 4 days. $300,000. Of course, the military's going to take care of all that. Other countries have more serious problems with tobacco than the United States. China's use is 50% higher. England's use is 40% higher. Japan's use is 50% higher. Globally, 12% of women and 47% of men smoke. So if you go to another country, the probability of running into a smoker is fairly high, even in Europe. There may be a predilection to use tobacco. The DRD2A1 allele is seen as the culprit. And we've already seen that DRD2A1 is the culprit in other addictions as well. A teen who smokes is 3 times more likely to abuse alcohol, 3 times more likely to abuse marijuana, 8 times more likely to abuse marijuana, 22 times more likely to abuse cocaine. Only 8% of black teens use tobacco, 15.7% of Hispanic teens use tobacco, 25.7% of white teens use tobacco. So tobacco is not that common with minority groups. However, when we're talking about American Indians, we're talking about a population that uses nicotine heavily. Sometimes you can't talk to them about it because they consider nicotine holy. It's kinnick. It's a holy substance, strangely enough. This is one of the reasons why that smoking is considered a gateway drug to other drugs, to stronger drugs. Nicotine contains from 4,000 to 48,000 chemicals. 400 of them are toxins. 69 are known cancer-causing substances. Worldwide, it is estimated that smoking causes 5 million premature deaths per year. 392,000 of these people are in the United States, 264,000 men, and 178,000 women. My friend who just died, his mother's still alive. His mother had to bury him. He was 68. His mother's 89. And she just buried her son, who died of natural causes, strangely enough. He died of a heart attack because he smoked cigarettes. One of these, what's happening? 392,000 people are dying in the United States of lung cancer, heart disease, and lung disease. What kind of lung disease? Emphysema. If you've ever seen anybody on emphysema, it's not a lot of fun. An additional 50,000 people died from secondhand smoke. So watching television last night, and a commercial came on, an advertisement. It said, the cigarette producing companies in the United States have been tasked by the Supreme Court to say that 50,000 people die every year from secondhand smoke. These are not people that are smoking cigarettes. These are people that are living with people who smoke cigarettes. So if you are a person that smokes, please do not smoke around your children. It's an advertisement. All the cigarette producing companies in the United States had to pay to have that advertisement put on television. 50,000 people die a year, and they don't even smoke, but they're dying of the same thing that smokers are dying from. 8.6 million Americans have at least one serious illness caused by smoking. It is estimated that a smoker loses 10 years off their life. Is that all? Just 10 years? That's not so much. Piece of cake. Smoking accelerates the process of atherosclerosis by increasing low-density fats, by increasing blood coagulability. When you smoke a cigarette, it makes your platelets stickier, so they stick together more readily, as odd as that sounds. It triggers cardiac arrhythmias. It reduces microrespiratory function by introducing carbon monoxide into the bloodstream. Carbon monoxide has a 230 times stronger affinity for oxygen, for hemoglobin, than oxygen does. So if you draw in carbon monoxide, what you're doing is you're locking up those red blood cells forever. You're killing them, in essence. And that's what carbon monoxide poisoning is. If you're in a room with carbon monoxide, and you breathe it for too long a period of time, you're dead. Because your brain isn't getting any oxygen. Now here's the kicker. If you're working in the emergency room and they bring somebody in who has died of carbon monoxide poisoning, instead of turning gray or pale, they're bright cherry red. They have the pinkest cheeks you ever saw. Because that's what carbon monoxide does. It makes your cheeks pink, makes them red. Tobacco is also a vasoconstrictor. So if you are a pregnant woman and you are smoking cigarettes, what you're doing is you're starving your child, your fetus, for oxygen. 1/3 of all smoking deaths are due to cardiovascular disease. 35,000 of these are from secondhand smoke. Have you ever heard of third-hand smoke? Secondhand smoke is the smoke that's flying around in the air. So if Tiffany's smoking over there, then the smoke that she's blowing at me, trying to kill me, is actually killing me because that's secondhand smoke. But there is a thing called third-hand smoke because there are tars and nicotine that are floating around in the air. And when that lands on something, then it causes a film of toxins.
So like a sweater?
So what?
Like a sweater, maybe?
It's like snow,
Okay.
and then it melts, and then it turns into water. And whatever was in that snow is on the surface, and it will be there forever, right? Because whatever minerals were in the snow are going to be there forever. Well, these are toxins, and these were in the smoke, and now all of a sudden the smoke has landed on a surface, and now those toxins are on that surface. So if you've got a little kid who chews on everything, then they're chewing these toxins, they're taking these toxins into their system, and it's poisoning them. Remember, it's poison. That stuff's poison. You saw all the toxins.
I think that's why I quit. I don't smoke.
No, of course not.
But her dad does. Which is why I keep her away from him.
He should only smoke outside, not in the room with the child.
It still smells when it comes back in.
He does, and those are the toxins. That's the third-hand smoke.
Strangely, I don't get addicted. The addiction thing by the smell of his cigarette. It's just like how can I say, like a suffocation for me now.
Here. Yeah, it's a pretty bad smell. Okay. Uh-oh, almost time. Bronchopulmonary diseases are far more prevalent among smokers than non-smokers. Emphysema, chronic bronchitis, and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Children who live with smokers suffer from more asthma, more colds, more bronchitis. 80 to 90% of all COPD deaths are due to smoking. And if you see these people around, they will be carrying around an oxygen tank, and they'll have to take off the oxygen because it's highly flammable, and to smoke their cigarettes. And then they put the cannula back in their nose so that they can breathe again. But they'll smoke while they're hauling around this oxygen. They're dead. Why don't we stop right here? Sorry.